And I'm very, very proud of our newspaper. We are a progressive newspaper for a small community. And I take a lot of joy in knowing that the Journal is 150 years old, and I've been there for 27 years of it.
That's tremendous. Kind of give me you and I have talked briefly about this. How did you come about this profession? Because it is an outstanding profession and not everyone gets into it. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of give us a little briefing of how this came about, that this field opened up for you?
Well, after college I was married, and I didn't work for a number of years. And one night Bob was reading the ads in the Journal, and he said that there was an opening for a writer, and I didn't rush down. They were advertising for someone part-time. And finally I went down and I talked to Gil Dietz, and he suggested I write an autobiography and bring it back, and I didn't hurry with it. And I did go back. He read it, and he said that, when would I like to start? And I said to him, oh, say, there's one thing. I don't drive. Would that make a difference? All this. And he said, yes, it might make a difference. So I thought, okay, I don't really care whether I work or not. I went home. And I got a call from the business manager, John Talbot, saying that if I would take the job, they'd teach me to drive on their time. So I've been there.
You, they were looking for you, weren't they, Helen? And like you say, you have been so happy with the situation, so everything worked out well. I know they've certainly been happy with your work, and we all have just been totally happy with all the different things you've done as your feature writing down there, specialization or feature. Mm-hmm. Can we kind of, I'm not going to try to expound on all the different features you've done because I don't think you can do them all. There are a number of them. So
I kept track of them until I got to 1,700 and something, and then I quit. I have no idea how many. But
well, kind of run down some of those. I can touch on a couple of them if you'd like. I was totally thrilled with some features that you'd done in prison. It just amazed me that you took your life and time to go into prison walls, because that's where these were done. Women and men both, incidentally, not just the one feminine sector. You did men too.
Yes.
And these were done within the walls. Can you kind of give me a little how that came about?
Well, I've been in Fort Madison 3 times in the men's prison. I've also been in the women's prison 3 times, and we were the first newspaper in the state of Iowa to do an in-depth series on the women's prison, which was just amazing because it had been there, that's 20 years ago, the first time. It had been there 50 years then. Now, you understand there had been articles, but no one had done an in-depth series. I went back to the women's prison about 4 years ago, and I did a story on a number of the inmates, but I did a little girl. Her name is Penny Miller. And she was 15 years old when her story started. She had lived in Duluth, Minnesota with with her mother, and she became angry at her mother, ran away, and went to Kellogg, Iowa to look up her dad, who had deserted the family when she was a baby. And she lived with him for about 6 months. And he gave her alcohol and drugs, and he assaulted her sexually. And he kept 2 guns in holsters on the living room wall. And one morning, she had it, and she took one and shot him. Well, she was tried as an adult, and she was the youngest prisoner ever to be incarcerated as an adult in an Iowa prison. I sat across from this little kid, and I, excuse me, I'm getting hoarse. My heart ached for her. Nobody in her family paid any attention to her. Nobody, ever. Not a letter, not an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, not even her mother, not even on Christmas. There are all kinds of people that I've interviewed. I've talked with murderers. I've talked with hard drug users. I've met them alone. one time I was talking with a young man. I met him, excuse me, I'm having voice trouble. I met him in a Sunday school room at the First Baptist Church because nobody would be there. He and a girl. I didn't know who he was. He was bearded, and as we talked, I found out later he was the son of a friend of mine. He told me how he enjoyed drugs. He told me about the good trips and the bad trips. I was so drained after that. You know, reporters are supposed to be objective.
Hard to do, I'm sure.
I feel so much the stories that I do, that after they left this little room, nobody was there. I sat and I cried. And I was so drained afterwards that I could hardly walk across the street to the Journal. It had just taken a lot out of me emotionally. But after I went in the newsroom, no one ever knew that.
Well, and your features show your feeling. It reflects in your writing, and I think this is what people enjoy so much for, Helen, that you do put your heart and soul into it and feel it. So I think this shows up and makes by far better reading.
Yes, I don't think a reporter, a journalist, any type, broadcast or print media need be a cream puff or a doormat. But a person who doesn't feel just can't really get across the message of the individual that he's interviewing. There might be one story that I did you might be especially interested in. About 4.5 years ago, I got a phone call from a fellow named Shorty Moore, and he told me that he was a informant with the police department, and he said he was going to need money to get out of town, and would I be interested in buying a story? And I said, no, I knew not. I knew that the Journal would not buy that story, but I said, I'd like to meet you. I knew I had a live one there, and I didn't want him to get away. So we agreed on a place to meet, and he was telling me all about this life of crime. I mean, that guy had been in prison, I think 5 times, from the time he was 12 to the time he was in his early 40s. Carried a 17-inch Bowie knife back here in the small of his back. And he turned out to be just a fascinating character. He came to Muscatine because he wanted to meet a woman with whom he'd been corresponding. She'd gotten his name through a pen pal magazine, and it was kind of a Lonely Hearts thing, you know. They came and they were married. He always referred to her as this little gal. He'd say, well, I came to Muscatine and married this little gal, and I saw her once. I think she weighed like 250 pounds, but she was his little gal, right. And they'd wire him, they'd send him out to make a buy. And then he knew things were getting too hot and he could be killed. He told me the time had come for him to leave town. He told me before he told the police. I'm only sorry I didn't bring a picture of him. He wore his hair down to his shoulders, wore an earring, had tattoos on both arms. One of them was a swastika.
Typical what you visualize as being the criminal element. And you did this without having to pay a dime. As you said, the Journal wasn't going to offer any money, and you did not.
No,
he gave you all the information free of charge because you did it on a one-to-one basis.
I said to him on the first meeting, if you can't sell it, will you give it to me?
There you go.
And he said, yeah, I'll think about it.
Well, that's great. That's great. Well, now, these are things that obviously behind scenes that we certainly enjoy hearing. One other feature I think that I know I get this thing wrong, that I've enjoyed, a little on the lighter side, is you're finding people who had lived here at one time. And again, you're going to have to give me the title of that because I get that always wrong. I know what I'm saying, but I'm not saying it correctly.
Whatever happened to.
Whatever happened to, and then fill in whoever it is. And you obviously go to great depths to find out where they are. And you're always kind enough to give the address so if people wish to get in contact, they can send a card, a letter, whatever they desire. I think that's been an admirable thing, too. I think we all enjoyed that.
Oh, I haven't done that quite as intensely lately. I wanted to see where our new editor stood on that, but she likes that. Would you be interested in hearing something about our editor and our publisher?
You're here to tell us about your life as a reporter?
Well, I'm very, very happy with the way things are. We have an excellent publisher. You've met her? Molly Carroll?
I have met
Yeah,
Molly,
woman,
yes,
very,
and
very
we have
capable
had the
businesswoman. And we have a super editor, and they're both in their 30s, young women with a great deal of skill. And the thing I think you're going to see with the journal, you're going to see stressed is quality. We were talking about feeling. I don't know if you read the Senior Citizens edition that just came out last Friday.
Yes, I certainly did.
But
pertained to us.
It did. And Anita, of course, usually writes editorials and a number of things like that. I happened to be on vacation that week, and I was reading an article she did on a whittle. And I was so pleased with the way she wrote that, because there was so much feeling in that story that she had certainly identified with the feelings of this older woman. And that's difficult to do. You go up and you tell somebody that you know what they're going through. Well, you don't know what they're going through until you go through it.
You have to try to visualize in your own mind.
I did a in-depth series on widowhood, from the couple world into the alone, about 9 years ago. In fact, it won first place in National Press Women, and I went to Philadelphia for that.
Beautiful.
And I came as close to understanding the heartache, I think, as anybody could, and not actually experience it.
Another of your features that I recall was well received when you did a segment on Unwed Mothers. I think you had some feeling there too, and interviewed a number of them and got their personal relations and history and what have you, which was very interesting too, because again, you were one-to-one basis with these people and they talked to you.
Yes, I did. I did one a number of years ago on unwed mothers and unwed fathers. Things have changed.
Forgot about fathers.
Always a father. Things have changed a lot, because the first one I did, in fact, I went to Des Moines to a home sponsored by the Salvation Army for unwed mothers. Wasn't allowed to use names, wasn't allowed to photograph the baby, everything was very hush-hush. The stories that I did were all anonymous. You could not identify anybody. Then last year, actually this year in January, we did another one on teenage parents, and it was so different. Everybody comes for the photograph, mother, father, and baby. Just because I write those things doesn't mean that I approve of them, you understand?
Sure not.
But certainly, it's a fascinating thing to listen to how people feel, and what they have to say, and what hope they have for their future. Even with odds against them. Oh, yes.
They do have. Well, that's at least looking a little better, because, again, I think we've talked about suicide.
Yes, I did a series on
suicide. Yeah, and some of these obviously are a possible candidate for suicide. However,
well,
not as much as other people, I think you.
I don't think
in
I
your
go
series.
quite that far, but that's all. That's certainly always a possibility. I've done series on almost every subject there is, I guess.
I believe so.
Mental illness. Went to the oldest privately owned psychiatric hospital in the United States. Went to the Hazelton Foundation near Minneapolis when I was doing a series on women alcoholics. And that's where Lucille Ball and Dick Van Dyke and Elvis Presley and some of the
big names
were
before,
supposedly,
yeah.
They never tell you. And they watched me like a hawk, because a reporter had signed himself in as a patient.
Tried to work it that way.
To get a real sizzling story. But it was an interesting experience. I have found that people are very open. People really do want to tell you the truth, and they're open with you, and the more relaxed they become as you talk to them, the more they tell you. I never divulge things that I'm asked not to divulge. I feel very strongly about that. I used to say, and it's never happened to me, but when I was doing the drug story, I would go to jail before I would betray somebody. I still feel that way.
It's amazing to hear you say that people open up to you, because in this day and age, it isn't common practice. So you obviously have an empathy that spreads to the person that they are willing to talk to you after having a short visit with you. Then they obviously have a one-to-one basis with you and do open up. And I think that's why you become as good in your field as can be.
Oh, thank you. I was trying to think of a few other things I've done that I have really enjoyed. I'd like to give some very, very special credit to a very special person.
Please
and that's
do.
Gil Dietz.
Just retired.
Gil just retired, and he was my boss for many, many years. And all of my years.
All of your years there, right?
He hired me when he was managing editor. Walter Russell was editor.
Okay.
And I really have had a lot of respect for Gil. He's been a good friend. Now, what else do you want me to tell you
Well,
about?
we've all seen, you mentioned one award that you received that you were quite proud of. There's more than one that you have been awarded throughout the years for your outstanding journalism. Expound on a few of those for us, Helen, will you?
Well, the first 12 years that I was with the Journal, I did not enter any competition.
Sure.
So they've all been won in the last 15 years. The Lord has been very good to me. I really enjoy winning awards. I've always said that people that say they don't care whether they win or not aren't telling the truth, because they wouldn't enter. They wouldn't enter if they didn't care. Of course they care. And it's fun to win. It's nice for the writer. It's nice for the newspaper. Just last month we won. Sean Plank and I both won with Associated Press stories. Mine was with a series on alternative sentencing. Sean's was on riverboat gambling. And our editor,
Very current.
very current. And our editor, Anita, also was not able to go because illness in her family, won a National Press Women's Award. I have won 2 National Press Women's Awards, a number of Iowa Press Women, some Iowa Press Association Award, and several Iowa Associated Press Awards.
Okay. All very prestigious.
That's
and
enough
I think
bragging.
that, no, I think this is something that should be brought forward. I think that's something that should be told so people will be aware just who we have in our midst here. Now, let's pin you down, if possible. After all the awards and the years that you've had in the field, will you be able to pick a favorite that you worked with that was dear to your heart? All are dear to your heart, logically, because that's how you could work on them that way.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say to me and to our audience one or another that sticks out in your mind as being something that you really felt a deep accomplishment, all again being accomplishments, but will you say one or two that
Favorite stories?
that you'd have to say, hey, I like these?
Well, Widowhood was the first national one. That was fascinating. I did young people who were widowed. I did a man who'd been widowed. I remember him sitting, I took him to a restaurant for coffee, and he would cry. And I almost cried too, but I didn't, but I came close. I did some people who had remarried. I think that segment we called, You'll Get Married Again, maybe.
Sounds reasonable.
And I did a lawyer and talked to a banker about finances. Who pays the bills afterwards, that sort of thing. That was probably one of my favorites. women alcoholics. It's hard for me to tell you.
Oh, I'm sure. With the amount, I
Yeah.
think you mentioned just briefly the number that you recall, the amount, which is astounding, how many that you've done over the years.
That
and
is
it would be
astounding.
difficult.
It really is for a small
Really?
town.
Yes,
I
it
think
is.
people are amazed when you say that you've interviewed thousands of people. But literally, that's true. There are thousands of people.
I'm going to pin you with something that you weren't prepared for particularly.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh, here we
When
go.
was your first byline?
My first byline.
I'll bet you know that.
My first byline was about, I started on the 12th of November, 1963, and my first byline was the following Saturday. I wrote
That
a
soon?
review, yes, yes. In fact, I covered a murder trial 2 weeks after I
Now
started.
that is something.
Yeah, well, they were short, they were desperate, you know, everybody else was sin.
You didn't really have a great amount of time as a cub reporter then.
No.
You went right into the full-fledged report right
It's
away.
been great, it's been great.
I guess so. I'm so
It's just
happy to
been
hear that.
wonderful, and you know, as schmaltzy as it sounds, people are really tremendous. And there's not such a thing as a dull story, just a dull writer.
Well, now you said it, and I think you certainly have the background and the knowledge and the expertise to say that. I can say, too, one of the things that hasn't been brought up that you're doing presently, that again I think people are enjoying, is this little segment of opinion that has also pushed you into, well, again, it didn't push you into, because many times with many of your features, you were also the photographer.
I am a photographer.
So you've also taken up that profession along with the reporting. But I've enjoyed, and I think a number of people have, waited each week to find out who you're getting opinions and for what. How do you come up with the question there? Is that out of your own mind? You try to
Most
keep it
of them.
current, obviously, logically.
Yes, occasionally
Naturally.
we slip in
Sure.
a seasonal question.
How do you find the people?
I go out to the library or
Okay.
to the stores,
Okay.
and I find them. And we're even thinking of having some little pins made up that say, "I talked to Helen."
Hey, why
I'll
not?
give you one.
Will you?
Sure.
Hey, I'll be the first to wear it. I think that's tremendous because, like I say, I have enjoyed it, and I know our viewing public here have waited, and as I say, I think each week to see that. Well, Helen, I can't tell you how interesting this has been. Do you have anything further to add as we wind down here today?
Well, I think we've pretty well covered everything. How many more minutes do we have? Are they signaling us that
Oh,
we're
yes.
out of time now?
No, we're not quite. We're getting closer.
So
But
we say goodbye.
we
Do that
we have
graciously?
to say, yeah, we always want to say that graciously. But again, we'll congratulate you with your employment of 150 years. I think that's outstanding,
Well, I
too.
haven't been there for 100
No,
years.
no.
You know, it may seem
I
that way.
back off of that, Helen, yes. That date's a little bit too
I urge
far.
everybody to come in and buy our 150-year T-shirts.
Anniversaries and T-shirts. Yes, you
T-shirts.
almost wore that today.
I
That'd have been
almost wore my
something, so.
T-shirt today.
Well, Helen, again, I want to thank you profusely for taking the time, which incidentally is on our vacation, taking the time to visit with us
My pleasure.
and giving us this information that was so very enlightening and very fascinating. I certainly have, and like I say, we've been neighbors and friends over the years, although we separated for a while. That happens in life. And again, I think it's just been something that was very interesting to hear, and we thank you so much for being with us. And we again want to thank you for being with us in the Seasoned Citizens segment. I want to take this time to thank our crew here today and thank the Heritage Cablevision Company for allowing us to use their facilities. So until next time, we thank you so much. Have a good day.